Let's go out and talk to one of our friends. Brian Baldinger just called in. Let's bring him in right now. Baldy, what is going on, my friend?
What's up, Zach? Guys, good to see you, man. Things are good. Things are good right now, man. I just did a football camp out in Los Angeles, like the top 80 high school kids in the country, man. So it was good. Good collaboration.
Man, that's awesome, Baldy. Love it. You're everywhere. From Vaughn's Pass Rush Summit to these camps. It's really cool to see, and love seeing you on our show. And the last time we talked, the NFL schedule hadn't been released. Now it is released. We see what the Broncos schedule looks like. They got two easier games to start. Then they end the schedule with 3 of their last 4 at home. When you see this Broncos schedule, what stands out to you?
Well, you're going to see Cam Ward day one. Cam Ward is going to see that, that pass rush that got unleashed in the NFL, number 1 pass rush in the NFL. And I don't know, if Dan Connor is out there playing left tackle, you might see Jonathan Cooper, you might see Bonito. You might see these guys just waiting in line to line up against him. He wasn't very good last year. They paid a lot of money for him to be left tackle to protect the blind side of Cam Ward. So then, you do that, and then, you get on, onto the schedule, and there's very, very winnable games there. At one point, you play the Jets and Giants back-to-back weeks. You're going to be favored against both those teams. So, the Chargers are your first division game the third week, but you could easily be 2-0, going to the Chargers for that division game.
I'm curious about that back-to-back stretch you mentioned, the Jets and the Giants. So the Jets game being in London, and then you come back and play the very next week, no bye week to play the Giants. I agree. Like, those are 2 games that you should win. Like, you look on paper and say the Broncos are the better team. How much does it change when those games are in London and then immediately after an international trip?
Well, they give you the option. Okay. So this, Jacksonville's been doing this for a long time. And, 1 year, actually, when Jacksonville was pretty good a couple years ago, they did that. They did a back-to-back, and they won both games. They won in London, decided not to take the bye week, because you do have the option, if you go to London, to take your bye week coming back. And other teams have done that. But then some teams are like, I don't know if it's too early in the season for a bye, whatever. But they decided to suck it up here, come back, and prepare. So they, Sean Payton, George, they all have the option of taking that bye, but they did it. But honestly, the Denver went to the Jets last year, and Jets couldn't score a touchdown against Denver in that game. And you won that game in the rain. The Giants, I believe, have the toughest schedule, at least on paper right now, of anybody in the league. Neither offense, I think, is better than the Broncos' defense. I could just imagine the amount of 5-man pass rushes that these teams are going to see, knowing that you now have Jade, you've got the defensive player of the year. You got guys that can lock up and get after you with the 5-man rush. This might be tough on some of these quarterbacks right now.
So when they don't take the bye after London, they end up getting it all the way in week 12. What are the pros and cons of having a bye so late in the season?
Well, I think the immediate pro is, most teams, 11 straight weeks. You're looking for a breather. You're looking to get guys healthy. Somebody's going to be banged up at some point. I just was talking to some Eagle coaches this past weekend, and they had 2 weeks to get ready for the Super Bowl. Well, their center didn't practice. Neither wide receiver practiced. The quarterback was out. They needed all 2 weeks to get ready for the Super Bowl. And so 11 weeks in, you get that opportunity. That can be a real pro. And then, look, the negative is if at some point, like, for example, I'm just using the Eagles as an example because I live here. But they last year, they got pasted by the Buccaneers in the 4th week of the season. It was ugly. And they were 2-2 and going south real quick. And they had a bye week. And they had a chance to regroup, really restructure the offense, kind of have they made some changes on defense. Cooper DeJean came in. Bryce Huff went out. They made some changes, and they went on a run. So the early bye, if you're struggling at some point, you can really kind of self-scout yourself and try to fix whatever is not working during that early bye.
Baldy, I have 2 questions about teams that are on the Broncos schedule, and from your national perspective, wanted to know what you think. Broncos play the Giants in Week 7, like we talked about. At that point in the season, Who is the Giants' starting quarterback? Is it Russ? Is it Jameis? Is it Jackson Dart? I think in Denver, people might want to see Russ, but at that point in the season, I think that's a fascinating spot the Broncos play him.
Yeah, look, Russell is getting all the first-team reps right now. He's the starter. Jameis is on the roster. Honestly, there's no point. I know Jameis had a great game against you guys last year. He was a classic double agent that day. Throw for 400 yards, throw all these interceptions. But honestly, when you draft a quarterback with the 25th pick like the Giants did, and you trade back in the first round, the idea that you're going to throw him in bubble wrap, Russell, Jameis, not get him on. If they're what'd you say, seventh week? If they're I don't know, if they're 2-5, 2-4, I mean, it might be time for Jackson Dart.
Yeah.
If they're 500, the schedule is ridiculous. But if they're 3-3 and Russell's playing pretty good, you're going to see Russell. But if they're 1-5, if they're struggling like they were this year, I mean, I think you'll see Jackson Dart before you see Jameis Winston. You might see Jameis early if Russell gets hurt and they're playing pretty good, and it's early in the season, second week, third week, he pulls up with a calf injury like he did last year, whatever. You might see Jameis in that situation. But otherwise, I think this thing is going to go from Russell to Jackson Dart.
And then one more team really quick, the Jags. The Broncos play them late in the season in December. Are the Jags going to be good this year? They're getting more attention because of Travis Hunter this offseason, but are they going to be good? Is that going to be a tough game for the Broncos, or are they going to be a team that had the 5th overall pick last year?
Well, I mean, the immediate answer to me is Trevor Lawrence has to play better than he did last year. And if he doesn't, then they're not going to be a good team. They're trying to do everything, including Travis, drafting Travis and Brian, Brian Thomas Jr. Like they've got some speed on the outside, but they could not run the ball. They drafted a running back. Maybe he gives them some pop. But I don't believe that they're going to be a great team. Right now, Trevor Lawrence is 2-13 in his last 15 starts. Now, maybe the coach, 2-13. So he collapsed in the end of the 2023 season. He was awful last year and was injured. So they've got a long way to go to get him right now.
I think the other team that we're struggling to figure out what they'll be is the Cowboys. Because I think you look at last year and say that's another game that the Broncos probably should win at home. At the same time, though, that was the first time they hadn't won at least 12 games in 4 years. So what do you think of the Cowboys? Is that one that the Broncos should feel pretty confident in at this point?
I would feel confident right now. I mean, we got to see what Brian Schottenheimer looks like. I mean, Mike McCarthy's been there a long time. Kellen Moore was there. Mike called the plays. Kellen called the plays. Kellen's a talented play caller. He's now the head coach. I mean, I don't think the Eagles win a Super Bowl without Kellen Moore in that spot, to be honest with you. So, but now it's the Brian Schottenheimer offense. And honestly, it has not been a difficult offense to defend over his history. Just hadn't. You just look at him in Jacksonville, look at him, in Seattle, look at him in different spots. I don't think it's a difficult offense. Even with the Jets and Brett Favre, he was the offense coordinator. Defensively, if Overshown comes back and Mike is good and, this kid they drafted in Boston College, plays at a high level, they've got speed on defense. But without Dan Quinn, they led the league in takeaways over a 3-year period of time and gave all those extra bats to Dak. And they took advantage of it. Plus, they scored a ton of defensive touchdowns. I just don't see that happening right now to Dallas. The offensive line should be better. They drafted well there. I just don't see a 12-win team out of Dallas this year.
Baldy, this question might not make as much sense to you because it relates to a conversation we were having earlier, but I'm just curious from a national perspective. If you can't pick Pat Surtain and you can't pick Bo Nix, when you think of the Denver Broncos, who's the player that kind of stands out to you as what it means to be a Bronco?
Well, I'm going to my wheelhouse. I'll take Quinn Miners every day.
Okay.
I just love that. In fact, you have a new assistant offense line coach now, Chris Morgan. He's there with Zach Strief. Now, Chris is a really good coach. I just saw him this weekend, but I just asked him about Quinn Miners. You just don't see people with that kind of strength and power on every team. You just don't. That guy moves bodies, and they're hard to find. But I know he's not a national guy, but you take Quinn Miners out of that offensive line, I don't think Bo Nix has nearly the success that he had a year ago.
Wow, I love that answer, Baldy. And final one for you. What now that we have the schedule, we've seen what the Broncos did in the draft. We've seen what they've done in free agency. We know Bo Nix is going into year 2 after a good rookie season. What are realistic expectations for the Broncos this year? They won 10 games last season. Is it realistic to say that they should win 12 games and be competing for the AFC West this year?
Well, when you go and you draft your quarterback like they did in Bo Nix, and you identify him as a franchise quarterback, and then you go out and you get RJ Harvey and you add the pieces around him right now to try to upgrade. You go out and you get yourself a tight end in free agency. You try to add more pieces. The idea is you compete every year now to be an annual playoff team, whether that's 10 wins, 11, chasing the Chiefs for a division title, getting into the playoffs, and going deeper into the playoffs. I think the bare minimum is 10 wins. Sometimes I feel like they're every bit of a 10-win team in a tough division. But if you just add one more win to 11, you're going to be in the playoffs. And the playoffs are they're just a different animal. It's played at a different speed. It's sudden death. Decision-making is paramount in these games. They're nail biters. So I would say 11 wins is realistic right now in a very tough division. I'm sure the Chargers feel the same way. I feel, Pete Carroll and with the Raiders said we could be a playoff team. I'm sure he's telling that to his team, and we know what the Chiefs think. So, you might be the toughest in football, but if you come out of there with 11 wins and Bo Nix takes another step and Vance Joseph, with what he's been given, gets even better, this could be a lot of fun.
Baldy, it's always a lot of fun talking with you. You always take that next step when you're on with us. We appreciate you joining us, and looking forward to our conversation next week.
You got it, guys. Take care, man.
Thanks,
Man.
Baldy.
Best.